Who the hell are you, and why are you cooking in my kitchen? That was the first thing out of my mouth when I came home early and found a stranger in my cabin. Pots were boiling on the stove, clothes were in my bedroom like she'd been living there for weeks. Then she says, "Barbara from the HOA said it's fine." Imagine walking into that. Rage doesn't even begin to cover it. As someone who works in security installation, I notice the smallest signs when something's wrong, and today, everything felt off. The afternoon sun was glaring, yet my porch light blazed like a beacon. I never leave it on, ever. That tiny inconsistency set my nerves on edge. I unlocked the door. It turned far too smoothly for something that had supposedly been locked for days. Garlic and simmering tomatoes drifted out to an unwelcome invitation. Someone was in my house, not just visiting, but settling in. I stepped inside, closed the door softly, and scanned the place. A purse sat on the table, a lipstick-stained mug, shoes by the door. My couch had a throw blanket I didn't own, a drying rack stood in the living room, women's clothes swaying in the fan's breeze. Then I heard it, a soft humming, light and cheerful, like whoever it was having the best day of their life. For half a second, I wondered if I had walked into the wrong home, but the family photo on the wall ended that thought. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and saw here a woman in her 50s, short brown hair, floral apron tied neatly. She froze mid-stir, wooden spoon clattering to the tile, her face draining of color like a candle snuffed out. "Oh my God," she stammered, backing into the counter. "You're a broken bar, you're not supposed to be here." I kept my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said, each word sharp. "What exactly are you doing in my house?" Her fingers gripped the counter like she was drowning. After a long pause, words spilled out fast. "Barbara said you'd be gone for 2 weeks. She told me it was safer for me to stay here instead of our broken bar where I was before." Barbara, HOA president. That name hit my gut like a brick. I glanced at the security panel. Dead. Not just disarmed or powered down. Someone had deliberately killed my system. I install these for a living, they don't just shut off. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. "Barbara let you in?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She nodded quickly, relieved, as if that explained everything. "Yes, she has a key." She said it's part of a community safety program. She even showed me how to turn off the alarm. My fists curled. Barbara didn't just have a key, she had my codes. I'd warned so many clients about the risk of giving those out, and here I was living that nightmare. "Pack your things," I said flatly. "You're leaving now." Her breath hitched. Instead of moving, she grabbed her phone and called Barbara. "He's back. He's telling me I have to leave." Even across the kitchen, I could hear Barbara's voice explode from the speaker, a sharp, furious, the kind of tone that strips paint from walls. Clear, that's what she finally told me her name was. Looked at me wide-eyed. "She's coming over. She told me not to let you make me leave until she gets here." I laughed once. "Cold. Force you out? This is my house. You've got 5 minutes." While she hovered near the stove, wringing her hands, I walked the perimeter of my own home like it was a crime scene. Drawers left open, my spare blanket on the couch, a toothbrush in my bathroom that wasn't mine. Every single detail felt personal and invasive. Chloe kept repeating, "I thought it was okay. Barbara said it was fine," but I wasn't listening anymore. This wasn't some misunderstanding, this was orchestrated. The drying rack with her clothes wasn't for a weekend emergency, this was weeks in the making. Barbara had timed everything perfectly. My schedule, my trip, the security systems shut down. She wanted a war. A car door slammed outside. Then came the staccato click of heels across my walkway. I fast and deliberate. Through the window, I caught a glimpse of navy blue and perfectly sprayed gray hair under the porch light, probably the same one she'd left on. I braced myself as the front steps groaned under her weight. The door burst open without a knock. Barbara didn't just walk in as she occupied the room, her presence filling every inch like smoke. Even Chloe shrank back, clutching her phone like it was the only thing keeping her afloat. Barbara's gaze locked on me, a sharp, assessing, like a hawk clocking onto its target. In that instant, I understood deep down, this wasn't confusion, This was a calculated move. And Barbara? She thought she'd already won. I glanced at Chloe, still frozen in place, apron splattered with sauce like a twisted badge of guilt, then back to Barbara, who was already preparing to launch her first attack. Standing in my own kitchen that suddenly didn't feel like mine, I knew one thing: whatever scheme she thought she was running ended tonight. If Barbara believed she could turn my home into part of her personal rental empire, she was about to learn the hard way. She had chosen the wrong man and the wrong house. The door didn't just open, it blew inward as if my place owed her something. Barbara stormed in, sharp suit, sharper attitude, heels striking the hardwood like a judge's gavel. She looked at me as though I was the trespasser. Chloe pressed herself into the wall, breathing fast, her presence small and trembling. "Grant," Barbara said, voice cold as steel, "you returned early without notifying Anna Dramanest, not even a greeting." I locked my jaw. "This is my home. I don't have to inform anyone when I come back." My words landed hard, but she didn't blink. Instead, she pulled a sheet of paper from her folder, holding it up like a sword. "Section 12.3, she declared. "Homeowners gone more than 7 days must notify Anna Dramanest for security purposes." Her tone carried smug triumph, as if a tiny line of fine print made her queen here. I stared at the minuscule text and replied evenly, "Barbara, I bought this property. I didn't sign away my rights." Her smile was thin and cutting. "Community living requires cooperation. You left the property vulnerable. I ensured it was safe." She glanced toward Chloe like she was a trophy of her so-called generosity. "Safe?" I stepped closer, my skin prickling with heat. "By moving someone into my home without permission?" Barbara lifted her chin. "Chloe needed housing. We have a duty to help residents in crisis." "She's not a resident," I snapped. "And duty doesn't mean breaking into my house." The air went tight between us, every sound amplified to the hum of my refrigerator. Chloe's shallow breaths. "How did you get in?" I demanded. Barbara's expression didn't change. "Anna Dramanest maintains emergency access to my locks." "My security system. Standard procedure," she replied crisply. "Emergency entry ensures property safety." My pulse pounded in my ears. "You shut off my alarm." Her lips curved faintly. "We have master access. It's for your protection." That's when I knew why it wasn't safety. It was control. She thought a title gave her ownership over people's lives. "You crossed the line," I said flatly. Barbara stepped closer, perfume cutting through the leftover garlic scent in the air. "What I did was necessary. Chloe would have been homeless tonight." "She's not my responsibility," I said, voice low. "And this isn't charity, it's trespassing." Barbara's eyes flashed like shards of glass. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" My laugh was rough. "You bypassed my security, handed my home to someone else, and now you're telling me I'm overreacting?" Her tone shifted from syrupy calm to venom. "Grant, that attitude won't help you. People who fight Anna Dramanest often find life here broken bar difficult." She let the words linger like smoke. My spine straightened. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality," she said smoothly. "You want peace? Follow the rules. Not law. Not fairness. Her rules." I could almost see the chessboard in her mind. Every homeowner just a pawn she could push around. But I wasn't a pawn. Not then, not ever. "Barbara," I said, voice steady as a trigger, "get out of my house." Her face hardened, but she didn't move. For several tense seconds we stood locked in silent defiance. Then she turned to Chloe. "Pack your things," she ordered, her venom coated in false pity. Chloe slipped past me, clutching her phone, eyes full of apology and fear. Barbara lingered in the doorway, her silhouette outlined in the light bleeding through the glass. She leaned in, voice cold as ice. "Fight me, and you'll regret it." Then she was gone, the door slamming with enough force to rattle the frames, leaving only the crash of silence behind. The weight of her presence lingered over the house like a heavy tide. I stood there staring at the empty doorway, my pulse refusing to calm. Outside, Barbara's heels struck the walkway like deliberate punctuation marks, each step a message. Then came the slam of her car door, a final, dismissive ear and the roar of her engine as she sped off. Her warning didn't leave with her. It stayed behind, thick in the air, like a storm cloud refusing to drift away. I turned toward the kitchen. Chloe's half-finished spaghetti still sat on the stove, steam fading, the sauce congealing into a deep, blood-red paste. A cheap apron hung limply over the back of a chair, like a white flag someone had already surrendered with. This was supposed to be my sanctuary, a place I had built for peace and quiet. Now, it felt tainted, every surface touched by hands that didn't belong here. My grip tightened on the edge of the counter until my knuckles blanched, forcing the heat inside me to harden into something sharper than Ragia pure resolve. Barbara thought she could stride into my life like a monarch laying claim to new territory. She assumed fear would keep me in line. She had no idea what kind of man she'd just crossed. I've spent 20 years protecting homes, learning where they're vulnerable, and closing those gaps, and tonight, she'd revealed exactly where hers were. By the time I sat at the kitchen table, my anger had cooled into razor-sharp focus. I opened my laptop and began compiling an evidence log of every detail, every admission, every system alert. Chloe's words about Barbara were etched into my notes like bullets on a list. She wanted a war. Now she had won. Outside, the wind rattled the trees like distant applause. My reflection in the window stared back at me, eyes harder, colder. Barbara wanted control. She wanted submission. What she was going to get was the truth, dragged into the open, kicking and screaming. And this was only the start. The next morning, I woke to the sound of tape tearing. At first, I thought it was some bird scratching at my screen door. But when I opened the front door, an envelope glared back at me in bold red: official anadrama nest violation notice. The alleged crime? Grass height. Apparently, my lawn had dared to grow beyond the sacred limit of 2.5 inches. I laughed out loud. 2.5 inches? I'd mowed just days ago, and it looked sharp enough to pass inspection at a golf course, but fine. I ripped the notice down and tossed it on the counter. It didn't stop there. Over the next mornings, the red envelopes arrived in a steady parody: a grass too tall, cameras unauthorized, my truck suddenly a hazard to community harmony. The hypocrisy stung. The same cameras Barbara had tampered with were now illegal. And the fines? They stacked fast. $150 for grass, $300 for cameras, $200 for improper vehicle alignment. I documented everything: photos, measurements, timestamps, proof stacked like ammo. If Barbara believed harassment would make me cave, she'd underestimated me badly. By the third day, the petty campaign turned into an open assault. The last notice hit like a gauntlet thrown: a mandatory disciplinary hearing. Failure to pay $650 in fines, it claimed, could lead to legal action and possible suspension of my residency privileges. Residency privileges, as if my home was hers to grant or take away. This was my land, my house, my rights, and Barbara was dangling them in front of me like bait on a hook. I stared at the letter, not with fear, but with the kind of cold, steady focus that comes before a storm. I got to work. First move, build a paper trail. At my desk, under the harsh glow of my laptop, I drafted formal responses to each accusation, a clean, precise, surgical. Every rebuttal backed with photographs, measurements, and documented times. I stapled them to a formal complaint: unauthorized entry, disabling of my security system, unlawful occupancy, and the retaliatory enforcement of fabricated violations. I sent copies to every board member, each email scrubbed clean and loaded with legal undertones. If Barbara wanted to fight, she was stepping onto my battlefield, and I don't fight fair. While the printer spat out page after page, I crack open the anadrama nest bylaws and read them word for word, memorizing every clause like a soldier learning enemy codes. Turns out, those emergency access privileges Barbara had bragged about, complete fiction. The rules covered landscaping in shared spaces, snow removal schedules, and parking on common roads. Now absolutely now did it grant the power to step foot inside a private home. Entering a private home without permission wasn't just an overstep, it was practically criminal trespass, and tampering with a homeowner's security system. That was a whole other level of violation. With every page I read, my frustration sharpened into resolve. Barbara wasn't protecting the neighborhood, she was carving out her own little kingdom on everyone else's property lines. By Saturday morning, I'd turned into a courier of truth. I personally delivered sealed packets to each board member, the envelopes weighted with damning evidence. Derek, the vice president, opened his door in a worn Broncos t-shirt, confusion creasing his brow. "Morning," I said evenly. "You'll want to read this." He flipped through the first page, his expression darkening. "Grant a broken bar. What is this?" "Proof that Barbara's been breaking laws while pretending to enforce them." His head snapped up. "Breaking laws? Start at page 3, I told him. "It only gets better." When I reached Robert, the treasurer, my pulse had steadied into something close to satisfaction. He skimmed the summary, muttering, "Unauthorized rentals. I'm not guessing. I've got names, dates, and payment records," I said. He looked like a man watching the ground crumble under his feet. "We need a broken bar. I mean, this has to go to the board." "Exactly. And while you're at it, check the books. If she's been pocketing cash, the gaps will be big enough to drive a truck through." I was almost home when my phone buzzed to unknown number. I answered. A pause, then a hiss. "You're making a big mistake. Some battles aren't worth fighting. Drop this while you can." I didn't need caller ID to know who it was. I smiled, not from amusement, but because threats are admissions of fear. Barbara was rattled. That was leverage. I saved the voicemail, exported it, and added it to my growing evidence file. If she wanted a fight, I'd give her a near documented, time-stamped, and bulletproof. That night, my kitchen table became a war room, covered with papers and a steaming mug of coffee, Barbara's threat playing on loop. This wasn't just about me anymore. If she could walk into my home, cut my security, and move someone in like it was a roadside motel, how many others had she done it to? How many just paid bogus fines because resisting felt hopeless? I pictured good neighbors bullied into submission by a woman hiding behind official letterhead. Not anymore. I drafted one more letter, this time to the entire board, calling for an emergency meeting to address abuse of power, possible financial misconduct, and the harassment of residents. It was polite, professional, a broken bar, and loaded like a round in the chamber. Barbara thought she could bury me in fake violations and intimidation. She forgot I designed systems meant to survive breaches. And now, I was the breach in hers. By the next morning, her text from the night before still echoed in my head. "Drop this before you cause trouble for yourself." She wasn't bluffing anymore, she was cornered. And cornered people make mistakes. I stepped onto my porch, coffee cooling in hand, scanning a street that now felt like hostile ground. She wanted this to feel impossible, like a mountain I couldn't climb. I smiled. "Game on," I muttered, picking up the first envelope from my stack of notes. My first stop was Mrs. Henderson's, 2 doors down. She answered in a faded rose print robe, her silver hair a soft halo. The moment I mentioned Barbara's name, her eyes flicked nervously over her shoulder. "You too," she whispered. That told me plenty before the tea was even poured. She'd gone to Florida for 3 weeks to visit her daughter, only to return to dirty dishes in her sink and a blanket on her couch that wasn't hers. When she confronted Barbara, the response was a smug smile and a claim it was a standard security check. Standard? That sounded more like burglary dressed up in etiquette. And then Barbara billed her $100 for the service. Once Mrs. Henderson started talking, the floodgates opened. A man across the street told me strangers had stayed in his house, and when he got home, half his liquor cabinet was gone, along with a sticky note on his fridge that read, "Thanks for the hospitality." Another woman returned to find her kitchen rearranged and was charged $200 under emergency occupancy. Different victims, same pattern. Every single fact was screaming the same thing: Barbara was running her own racket right in the heart of our neighborhood. She wasn't protecting Homer, so she was turning them into weekend rentals and pocketing the profits. No permission, no oversight, just her and a ring of keys that gave her power. By that evening, my dining table had transformed into a war map, and names, dates, receipts, spread out like ammunition. Every sheet screamed the same truth. Barbara was running a scam right under everyone's nose. My printer spat out pages like gunfire as I dug deeper, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I pulled up the anadrama nest bylaws again, searching for even a shred of language that could justify what she'd done. Nothing. No loophole, no fine print, no exception gave her the right to enter private homes or disable security systems. She'd built her empire entirely on fear and lies. To be sure, I called Secure Home Solutions. "Does the anadrama nest have any master override authority?" I asked. The tech laughed so hard I could hear his chair squeak. "Not unless you give them the code self or a court orders it." Ever. The truth hit like a sledgehammer, as she had no legal right. Every time she used that key, every time she disabled an alarm, it was trespassing. My pulse pounded. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute, Anna Maria. It was a criminal operation, and I held the match that could burn it all down. I didn't feel tired, only wired. Closed texts, suspicious bank transfers, Barbara's threatening voicemail, Mrs. Henderson's tea-stained confession, as they piled up on my screen like bricks. I sorted them, tagged them, and built a timeline sharp enough to cut glass. My laptop glowed in the dark as I dropped audio files into a folder marked exhibits. Each saved file felt like chambering a bullet. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Grant, stop this now," she whispered, her voice dripping with poison. "You think you're winning, but you're about to burn down more than you know." Click. Line dead. My jaw locked. If she was scared, I had the upper hand. I saved the voicemail as Exhibit 12. Then I drafted a formal request for full disclosure of anadrama nest financial records from the past 2 years, citing the state law that forced compliance within 10 business days. I CC'd the entire board, attaching just enough evidence to make them sweat without revealing my full arsenal. Hitting send felt like pulling a trigger. By morning, the sky was a deep bruise, and I was back in my truck with envelopes fat enough to choke a shredder. Each board member got a packet of names, dates, screenshots of the ugly truth laid bare. Derek, the vice president, opened his door in a faded Broncos t-shirt, blinking like he'd stepped into a crime scene. "This is something you need to see," I said, handing him the packet. He flipped the first page, his brow tightening like barbed wire. "What is Thesa proof?" "Barbara's not enforcing rules," I told him. "She's breaking them, and making money while she's at it." By the time I reached the treasurer's mailbox, Derek called. "We need an emergency meeting. Barbara's blowing up my phone." Good. My shot had landed. I gripped the steering wheel, the hum of the road matching the steady beat of my thoughts as she wanted control. But she was about to lose everything. I wasn't just after her position, I was after the whole rotten system she built. And when it was over, there wouldn't be a throne left for her to crawl back to. When I got home, my phone buzzed again. 5 words flashed on the screen: "You should have stayed silent." I scanned the tree line. For a moment, I swore I saw movement, to a shadow slipping away into the dark. My gut tightened. Barbara wasn't just playing anadrama nest anymore. She was going to war. And so was I. The anadrama nest clubhouse looked like a courtroom in disguise. Cheap fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, bouncing off polished tile floors, making faces appear pale and tight with nerves. Rows of folding chairs sat like soldiers, filled with neighbors leaning forward, hungry for the show. This wasn't an ordinary meeting. The air reeked of fear and burnt coffee. Tonight was judgment night, and Barbara knew it. I gripped the folder in my lap of photos, statements, and enough evidence to bury the reign she'd strutted around here with for far too long. She made her entrance 5 minutes late. The kind that screams "I'm in control." She stepped forward as if the room still belonged to her, declaring, "This is still my stage." The blazer she wore had the kind of price tag that made people pause, yet it was stiff as armor, just like the way her clenched jaw revealed more than her lips ever would. Trailing behind her was a man in a wrinkled grey suit that looked like it had been through a battle, one he clearly lost to both fashion and truth. Barbara introduced him as her attorney, her voice coated with sugary superiority, but even a casual glance could tell he was no courtroom warrior. He had the air of someone who fixed garage doors rather than argued cases. A ripple of whispers rolled through the crowd, and even the buzzing fluorescent lights seemed to hum with skepticism. Barbara wasted no time launching into her performance, dropping phrases like community trust, shared values, and protecting property with an almost religious conviction. Her voice was honey, but her gaze cut like glass. She painted herself as Pine Ridge's guardian angel, with people like me cast as the villains threatening her perfect little kingdom. I let her talk. Every word she uttered was another loop of rope tightening around her own neck. When she finally stopped to breathe, the chair turned toward me. I rose slowly, calm, carrying my evidence like a loaded gun, laying out the documents of photographs, bank receipts, text screenshots so they formed a neat line across the table like dominoes waiting to fall. My voice stayed level, slicing through the murmurs. Who authorized emergency access to private homes without the owner's consent? The silence that followed was deafening. Barbara's jaw twitched, her knuckles whitening against the table. Before she could spin another lie, a chair scraped from the back of the room. Chloe stood, cheeks flushed, her voice shaking but strong enough to break the stillness. Barbara charged me $300 a week to stay in Grant's house, she said. The words landed like an explosion. Heads snapped toward her, gasps echoing off the walls. Whispers sparked in the corners like wildfire. Barbara's hiss was pure venom. You little liar, she spat. But Chloe didn't waver. Tears shimmered in her eyes, yet her chin stayed lifted. I slid another paper across the table. 2 months' worth of bank transfers, I said flatly, straight to Barbara's personal account. The air shifted, a shock, anger, disbelief blending into something sharp. Derek, the HOA vice president, spoke in a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. Barbara broken bar, this doesn't look good. That was the trigger. She erupted, raging about sacrifices, the endless hours she'd spent holding the neighborhood together, screaming that no one appreciated her. Her fist slammed the table so hard a water pitcher toppled, spreading across the wood like blood at a crime scene. Neighbors flinched at the raw, feral edge in her voice. But tonight, her anger wasn't power, it was desperation. And desperation reeked. I waited for the silence to settle before stepping forward, my tone soft but sharp as a noose tightening. If you're done, I said, turning to her so-called attorney, state your bar number for the record. His mouth opened, shut, then opened again like a fish gasping on a dock. His admission came in a low, reluctant voice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a broken bar, her brother-in-law. The sound that followed was half gasp, half sharp laughter. People exchanged stunned glances. Barbara's face went crimson, veins standing out like cracks in porcelain. Words stumbled from her tongue, tripping over age before collapsing into silence. The crown she'd worn so proudly had slipped, shattering for all to see. Derek's gavel slammed down, his voice cutting through the chaos. Enough. We vote now. Motion to suspend Barbara, effective immediately. Hands rose one by one. Lisa's trembled, but it went up. The treasurer followed, jaw tight. Derek lifted his last. 3-1. Motion passed. In under half a minute, it was done. Barbara stood frozen, clutching her folder like it could hold her world together. She spun, knocking over a chair that skittered across the tile. Her brother-in-law scrambled after her, tripping over whatever dignity he had left. At the doorway, she turned just long enough to fling her last threat into the air. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. The door slammed, rattling the blinds, and in the sudden stillness, the only sound left was the uneasy shuffle of feet and the quiet creep of fear that told everyone exactly what I already knew. Barbara didn't accept defeat, she turned it into vengeance. I slid each page of evidence back into the folder with meticulous precision. My hands stayed steady, but the heat in my chest reminded me this wasn't a victory lap. Outside, the night hung still, too quiet, like it was waiting to pounce. The air sliced sharp against my face as I stepped out, boots crunching on gravel that sounded far too loud in the silence. I opened my truck door, its metal icy under my fingers, and tossed the folder onto the passenger seat. The engine roared awake, headlights spearing through the darkness. I finally let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding it until my phone buzzed. A text lit up the screen like a fuse sparking in pitch black. 5 words. No name. Just, "You should have stayed silent." My pulse slammed against my ribs, a cold knot forming in my gut. My eyes scanned the empty parking lot except for the clubhouse door, creaking open like something out of a nightmare. Then movement. A shadow unpeeled itself from the darkness, long and reaching, stretching across the pavement like it had no intention of letting me go. I shifted into drive, eyes fixed on it, the text still burning in my mind. Barbara was done playing by rules. And I was done waiting for her next strike. A furious pounding rattled my door, not a knock, but the kind of hit meant to assert dominance. My heart raced as I crossed the living room. Through the side glass, red and blue lights sliced my walls apart. 2 officers stood at the door, their hands hovering near their belts. And behind them Barbara, chin high, lips curled into a smile that almost passed for triumph. "Mr. Grant," the taller officer said, his clipped, professional tone carrying weight. "We need to talk." Barbara glided forward, head tilted like she was posing for a courtroom portrait. "Thank you, officers," she purred before letting her voice crack perfectly on cue. "He's harassing me, spreading lies, threatening my life." The words slid out smooth and practiced. Neighbors gathered at the edge of my lawn, phones out, recording every moment of Barbara's stage. She wasn't just accusing me, she was performing for the entire block. "Step inside, sir," the second officer said evenly. "Sure," I replied, moving aside. Barbara floated in behind them like royalty inspecting her kingdom, eyes darting around my living room as if already picturing her victory. Then she snapped. "Where's the weapon?" My brow furrowed. "Weapon?" "The gun he threatened me with," she spat. The taller cop's attention sharpened, but not in her favor. I didn't waste breath arguing her words were her weapon, not mine. Instead, I walked to the dining table, where a thick binder waited like a coiled snake. "Before anyone buys this fantasy," I said, voice low and cutting, "you might want to look at this." The officers stepped closer as I opened it, revealing photos, notices, screenshots, and text logs of weeks of proof forged into a sledgehammer. Every letter, every scam, every time she broke the law, I added. Barbara laughed, a shrill, desperate sound. "This is fabricated. He's dangerously obsessed with me." "Funny," I muttered, sliding my phone across the table. "You don't sound very scared." I hit play. Her own voice filled the room. "Drop this nonsense while you still can." The acid in her tone was undeniable. The taller officer's jaw tightened. The shorter one scribbled notes without looking up. Barbara's mask cracked for just a heartbeat, revealing something raw-cornered prey. Then Chloe appeared in the doorway, pale and tense. I locked eyes with her. "Tell them," I urged, steady but firm. She faltered, glancing between Barbara and me. Her fingers twisted the hem of her sweater. Silence hung heavier until it broke. "Barbara told me to lie," she whispered. "She scared me. She paid my rent with his house." Her confession landed like a guillotine. The officers turned in unison. Barbara's face flushed with rage. She lunged, but the taller cop caught her wrist mid-swing. "That's enough," he ordered, voice cold steel. Barbara thrashed, screaming about loyalty and betrayal. My pulse thundered as relief seeped in. Weeks of hell boiled down to this momentous truth detonating in the heart of her empire. But she wasn't finished clawing for control. "You fools!" she shrieked, tearing at the binder. Pages scattered across the table like wounded birds. "He's framing me. I built this community. I saved it from trash like him," she howled, her voice breaking under the weight of fury and hysteria. The shorter officer pressed the last page flat with his palm, unmoved. The taller one stepped closer. One officer moved with calculated precision, twisting her arm behind her back as the cold snap of handcuffs cut through her meltdown. "Barbara Sanderson, you're under arrest for fraud, trespassing, and filing a false police report. The words struck harder than any gavel. Barbara froze for a moment before erupting into shrieks. "You can't do this to me!" she wailed, thrashing like a wild animal caught in a trap. "I'm the victim." But the cuffs told another story. The officers marched her toward the waiting car as neighbors' phones lit up, recording every second. Gasps, whispers, and the hum of camera apps filled the air. Every flash was another nail in the coffin of her so-called reign. She shouted names, hurled threats, and promised revenge until the cruiser swallowed her whole, its door slamming shut like a final sentence. Red and blue lights pulsed down the street, dragging her away into a darkness she could no longer control. The taller officer glanced back at me, his tone quieter now. "You handled this smart," he said. "Could have gone bad fast." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Appreciate that." "We'll need your full statement tomorrow," he added, closing his notebook. Then they were gone, engines fading into the night, leaving only the faint whisper of tires on asphalt. I stood there, staring at the empty street, my body trembling as if a bowstring had just been released. Inside, the house seemed to breathe again. The binder lay shredded on the table, but it no longer mattered. The truth was out, and the self-proclaimed queen had fallen. Still, unease crawled beneath my skin. People like Barbara don't disappear, they retreat and plot. I looked around at the wreckage and then at the quiet glow of the security panel. For the first time in weeks, it truly felt like my home again. But as the last echo of sirens faded, one thought carved itself deep: this isn't over. 3 weeks after Barbara's arrest, the neighborhood felt scrubbed clean. No more red-stamped notices on doors, no whispered gossip curling through hedges, just a heavy, almost tangible calm. But peace wasn't the only thing spreading. Barbara's downfall had gone viral. The police report read like a crime thriller: 14 homes breached without consent, over $23,000 funneled into her personal accounts, and a paper trail stretching back 2 years. When the story broke, it didn't just hit local news, it exploded online. On Reddit, under a thread titled "When Hoes Go Rogue," her mugshot appeared beneath the caption, "Neighborhood Queen Dethroned." The comments were brutal. My personal favorite: "She turned the hoe into Airbnb minus the permission." Someone even photoshopped a tiny crown on her head with "vacancy available" flashing above it. Twitter caught on next. Hashtags like #buy Barbara and #hoe from hell started trending. Justice had become a meme, and watching her empire crumble in HD was the most satisfying thing I'd seen in years. Court day came quickly, and I made sure to be there. Barbara climbed the courthouse steps in a battered navy suit, her hair limp, makeup smudged from sleepless nights. Cameras swarmed, microphones stabbing at her like bayonets. Through it all, she tried to smile, that fake, brittle grin cracking the instant a reporter asked, "Barbara, did you really rent out your neighbors' homes?" The twitch in her jaw said it all. Inside, her mask shattered completely. She started defiant, a chin high, tossing around words like slander and witch hunt. But the judge wasn't buying tickets to her show. When the charges were reared: fraud, criminal trespass, falsifying police reports, her voice wavered. "I was protecting this community," she sobbed, black mascara streaking like war paint in the rain. The gavel hit hard, echoing through the marble hall. Restitution, full penalties, jail time. And just like that, the queen of the cul-de-sac had no throne, no keys, no kingdom. Deputies cuffed her, the metallic click ringing like a drum roll. It wasn't just a sound, it was punctuation, the period at the end of her dictatorship. Outside, phones lit up again, capturing her being led to the cruiser, still screaming about loyalty and betrayal. I stood in the crowd, not gloating, just breathing steadily, like someone stepping out of a storm cellar after the tornado has passed. For a moment, I thought she might glance my way and hurl one last threat. But she didn't. She just kept shouting into the empty air, her words landing on ears that no longer cared to listen. The hoe didn't waste a second digging through the mess. Emergency elections were held within days, and the new board moved fast. Fresh locks went up, ending Barbara's precious exclusive access rule. The bylaws were rewritten so tightly you could bounce a coin off them. Every financial record was opened for public view. No more secret accounts fattened by fear. One new rule, printed in bold for all to see, earned a standing ovation. No master keys. No exceptions. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The weapon Barbara had used to control everyone was now gone for good. This street had learned the lesson the hard way. Neighbors began coming forward with stories that turned my stomach. One man admitted he'd handed Barbara cash to avoid violations that never existed. Another revealed she had broken into her garden and billed her for a so-called premium redesign. Someone even found a tracking device hidden under his car, Barbara's way of catching late-night parking offenses. Every confession was another shovel of dirt on her reputation. This was never about community care. It was organized greed, dressed in pastel newsletters and fake neighborly smiles. And for 2 years, nobody fought back because fear can silence even the loudest voices. Now, I finally had peace. Real peace. No pounding on the door. No phony fines slipped under the mat. Just quiet mornings on the porch with a hot mug of coffee, watching the lake beyond the pines ripple like glass. I fixed the damage she caused, replaced the busted door frame, rearmed the security system, and even planted fresh flowers by the steps. It's funny how simple things feel like luxury when you've spent months at war inside your own home. One night, while cleaning out a cabinet, I stumbled across something that stopped me cold. Barbara's master key. I'd picked it up from the grass the day after her arrest and tucked it into a jar, completely forgetting it was there. I held it under the lamp, its jagged teeth gleaming like a predator's grin. This tiny piece of metal had been her crown, her weapon, her gospel. Now, it was nothing but a dead relic in my hand. I screwed the jar lid tight and placed it beside my copy of the HOA bylaws. It would stay there forever, a warning in glass. Power borrowed is power that burns you. Then came Barbara's encore, courtesy of the internet. A neighbor uploaded slow-motion footage of her arrest, complete with dramatic background music. It started on TikTok, then exploded everywhere. Captions screamed, "Queen dethroned, caught in 4K. Someone turned her meltdown into a dance meme. Another photoshopped her mugshot onto an Orange is the New Black poster. My favorite, a photo of the master key wearing a crown with the words "Long live the Queen." Oh wait. I laughed so hard I spilled coffee across the counter. For once, karma didn't whisper. It went viral. Sometimes I think back to the first day I unlocked my own door and felt like an intruder. Barbara hadn't just tried to break the rules, she tried to break my peace. And she failed. Victory didn't look like a parade or sound like a speech. It looked like my own lock clicking shut, smelled like garlic cooking in my kitchen, and sounded like the slow creak of my porch swing. The neighborhood transformed too. Kids rode bikes without someone snapping pictures for evidence. Neighbors waved instead of glaring over hedges. Barbecues replaced secret board meetings. Even the air seemed lighter, like the whole street had exhaled at once. We didn't just fix bylaws, we fixed the silence. Fear doesn't live here anymore. Last night, as the moon scattered silver across the lake, I stared at that mason jar on the shelf. Just glass and metal, nothing more. But to me, it's a monument. Proof that crowns crack, keys rust, and tyrants fall. Barbara thought she ruled this street. Now her kingdom is a jail cell. And I can't help but laugh at how wild it all became. Months ago, I only wanted a quiet life. Instead, I ended up in an all-out war with someone who thought a title gave her the right to run everyone's life. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: never underestimate how far control freaks will go when they think no one's watching. Paperwork, power trips, fake smiles are their weapons. But the flip side is simple: receipts, cameras, and a backbone. Those win wars. If this happened to you, would you have gone nuclear like I did, or just packed up and left? Drop your thoughts below. And if you've enjoyed walking through this chaos with me, hit that like button and subscribe for more Anadrama Nest stories. And hey, if you feel like buying me a coffee for surviving this circus, that little thanks button is right below. No pressure, but it helps keep Anna Drama Nest stories coming. That's it for now from Anna Drama Nest. Make sure you're subscribed, with the bell on. The next story might just top this one.